Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Andrea Weckerly, and welcome to the Ready Living podcast, where each episode is designed to educate, inspire, and empower you to create the life you want. Thanks for joining us, and remember to subscribe for free on your favorite platform. My guest today is Bennet Kelley. Named one of the nation's top internet lawyers, he heads the Los Angeles-based boutique law firm, the Internet Law Center, which focuses on offering legal and policy solutions for entrepreneurial businesses and also works to support victims of online harassment. During his career, he has advised, testified, lobbied, litigated, and written on a variety of issues such as cybersecurity, cyber harassment, online marketing, spam, spyware, internet gambling, and net neutrality. Prior to founding his firm, he served as in-house and outside general counsel for several entertainment and technology companies. He is also an award-winning political columnist who has provided political analysis and insight to television, radio, and print media, ranging from CNBC to the Washington Times. He has a bachelor's degree in political science from American University and a Juris Doctor from Georgetown University. Welcome, Bennet.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to jump right into it. There's a lot of incendiary content online, and especially in the political sphere. People are genuinely confused about what's legal and what isn't. Can you give us a quick overview of what's considered legally permissible speech online and what the difference is between protected speech and hate speech?
The First Amendment regulates government restriction on free speech. And so government can't take action to restrict your ability to say what you want. The platforms you're on can have certain rules about what they permit and what they don't. They moderate that aggressively or non-aggressively. Hate speech is a broad term. It can include racist, anti-Semitic, other bigoted speech, sexist. In the United States, relevant is if it's directed and if it's tied to certain actions. So if I'm threatening to do something to someone, then there could be something that requires action. I get a lot of phone calls from people, so-and-so is threatening to do something against me. And, and there are times when you ignore it, and there are times you get a restraining order. Hate speech with action or threatened action, that's one thing. But just general hate speech is, to an extent, protected by the First Amendment, but probably violates platform policies.
You were among the first lawyers in the country fighting online abuse, and in 2019, the Justice Department brought you in for a 2-day strategy session on what they called technology-facilitated abuse. In other words, doxing, sextortion, romance scams, digital harassment. Has the law meaningfully caught up to these harms, or are victims navigating a system that doesn't match the realities of digital abuse?
The law is very slow. The number 2 Democrat in the House, Catherine Clark, she was doxxed, and she's introduced legislation to ban doxing. There is no federal doxing law. Congress has been slow to respond. 20 states do have laws dealing with doxing. You can have civil remedies. You can try to get an injunction or a restraining order against that person. Doxing, swatting, these are real things that have very serious consequences.
The impact of social media on children and teenagers has been a hot topic for quite a few years, but now it seems to finally be finding some legal footing as well. In March of this year, juries in 2 important social media trials found for the plaintiffs. On March 24th, a New Mexico jury found Meta liable for failing to protect children from sexual exploitation and for misleading users about safety on its platforms, ordering the company to pay $375 million in civil penalties. Meta is, of course, appealing. And a day later, on March 25th, a Los Angeles, California jury awarded social media user Kaylee GM $3 million in compensatory damages and an additional $3 million in punitive damages against Meta and Google in a 70-30 split for deliberately designing addictive products. Do you think this is the beginning of holding social media platforms accountable?
It's a start. In the early days of the internet, Congress made a choice, and they passed the Communications Decency Act. And it has a Good Samaritan clause that basically says that online platforms are not liable for the content posted by other parties. That allowed a flourishing of debate and a lot of platforms covering every topic you can imagine. And in general, that's a good thing. The problem was if the platforms aren't liable, the posters are liable, and they're often hidden or they have no assets or they're hard to find. And so that creates a challenge. I think what we're seeing right now also conflicts with another concept called product liability. You have someone marketing a product and they're telling people, hey, this is safe, when they're not taking measures to make it safe. In product liability, there's liability when you market a known unsafe product. And if you're marketing something harming children and you're not taking measures to prevent that, well, then that's a grounds for liability. People are concerned about the impact on children, the suicides we're seeing, but also there's studies on the impact of the online time people are spending and their cognitive growth. Thank you for this great gift of the internet. Now we've been through one generation of it or so. What should the next generation of internet be for America? In 1999, I think, or 2000, the Clinton administration was talking about some privacy regulation, and then Bush won and it died. And so what you've seen is a shift in the regulation of the internet away from the US, which was largely through states like California, now to the EU.
I do want to mention Australia's recent social media ban for children under the age of 16, which went into effect in December of 2025. And that includes TikTok, X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Snapchat. The old accounts that minors had were deactivated and they can't set up new accounts under their own name. Given the increasingly recognized negative impact social media has on young people, and you mentioned suicides earlier, could you see a ban like that happening in the United States? And what would be the biggest constitutional, political, and cultural barriers?
Well, obviously, First Amendment challenge. I'm conversant with a lot of the leading open internet advocates, very ardent about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act that protects the internet and the open platforms.
Is it just a very convenient argument because they want to maintain the non-liability under Section 230 or on the pro-business side?
A lot of the people that I follow and engage with, they're on the academic side. It's hard for them to concede why they should allow restrictions on current systems or that you can convince them that you can't do it another way.
A few years ago, and I believe this was in 2020, Facebook paid $52 million as part of a settlement agreement in which it admitted no wrongdoing, I should note, to thousands of content moderators who developed PTSD from the material they were required to review. That case took place in California, and in early 2025, Meta announced it was moving Facebook and Instagram content moderators from California to Texas. How significant is venue and choice of law in shaping how much accountability social media companies face?
Obviously, Texas is more employer-friendly. The jury probably will be more employer-friendly as well, less likely to get very high judgments, although you never know. The Texas system is very protective of the employer. In California, there would be different considerations at play. I just read some of the stories of the horrible things that they have to review, and it would just shock the conscience. There's a great movie, I think it's Five Came Back, about 5 great American directors who assisted in the war effort in World War II. And one of them was William Wilder. He was the one who got to the camps.
The Nazi death camps.
He knew right away that he had to record this. In fact, filming was used as the Nuremberg trials. And he had all the films in his basement and hardly ever went there. It really changed him. And so you can understand how having to review some of the garbage that's out there day in, day out, rape, pedophilia, murder, just disgusting things, your daily ritual, is hard. California may have certain sensibilities, worker rights and human rights that may or may not be applied in Texas. Some of it's also done offshore. We're exporting the psychic damage to other countries, and people should be more aware of just how horrible that is. None of us would want to do it. We should have an appreciation for what goes into that.
The internet gives us access to unprecedented amounts of information. And in theory, that's a good thing. But if even only a part of what's offered is factually wrong, that can create all sorts of problems ranging from societal and political to financial issues and more. And that's always been the case, but it's now exacerbated through AI. A recent article in Futurism noted that Google's AI overviews are peddling misinformation on a scale that may be virtually unprecedented in human history. And a recent analysis by startup Omi found that AI-generated summaries, which appear above Google search results now, are accurate about 91% of the time, with Google processing around 5 trillion search queries every year. It means it gets hundreds of thousands of wrong answers every minute, according to the analysis. I mean, these are astounding numbers. This also matters because people tend to blindly trust what AI tells them. One report found that only 8% of users actually double-checked an AI's answer. Another experiment found that nearly 80% of the time, users still listen to AI even when it gave them the wrong answers. Researchers describe this as cognitive surrender. And so what liability does Google or any other AI company have for the misinformation they're distributing at that scale?
I don't know if Google should have liability. Even before AI, we knew that there were things on the internet that weren't correct. I've used a slide in several presentations of my favorite quote: "The internet is a great source of information and disinformation," said by Abraham Lincoln. This is just accelerating it. As lawyers, geez, you've seen people submit fake cases.
I know. If anybody should know that, should be attorneys. Oh, I cringe every time I see that happening.
Yes, it is a problem. It's incumbent on us to be smart consumers of the internet and just let people know what you see in that box isn't always right.
With the proliferation of AI, how can people determine what they're seeing is actually real? I mean, no one with even half a brain actually believed the AI image President Trump released of himself looking like Jesus, which, by the way, he later removed after across-the-board outrage. It was supposed to symbolize Trump as a medical doctor, he claimed. But there are images used in the political realm and elsewhere that are dangerously misleading. So with the upcoming midterm elections and the presidential election in 2 years, do current legal tools meaningfully address synthetic media in elections, or are we operating with frameworks built for a pre-AI world?
I think this came out in 2016. There were bots spreading a lot of misinformation. There's been a conclusion that there was a campaign by Russia to influence our 2016 election. It's not just Russia. Iran has bots that are doing it. China, it's a problem that we've been dealing with now for at least a decade.
Aside from the misinformation, another thing that caught my attention and was really concerning to me was that AI is being used for violence. There was a recent report, it was just released in March of 2026 from the Center for Countering Digital Hate, that said how 8 in 10 leading consumer AI platforms' chatbots were regularly willing to assist users in planning violent attacks. And these attacks include everything from school shootings, religious bombings, high-profile assassinations. How is it even legally permissible that AI platforms are assisting in planned attacks? Because presumably this is not a partisan issue. Nobody wants to see AI being used for violence against innocent people out on the street.
Compare two stories. There was a story of a Massachusetts woman who was friends with someone. The kid was suicidal. He went into the garage and turned on the car and was going to gas himself. He changed his mind and got out. And the girl said, "No, go back in."
I remember this.
And then there's a recent story of AI explaining to someone how to do it. AI saying this is how you do it isn't necessarily using coercion, but it is troubling that AI is informing someone how to kill themselves. And so information's out there. We can't outlaw the information. But what we're dealing with now, I think, in technology and people have lost sight of is the difference between whether I can and whether I should. Too often lately, especially in an AI debate, once you start saying I can, that's the end of the discussion. But no, there's a question of whether you should as a responsible company. People as consumers, as regulators, they have a right to demand at least some evaluation of what you should do.
Let's talk about copyright and AI. In 2023, there was a class action lawsuit against AI companies that used billions of internet images to train their AI art tools without the consent of artists and without compensating them. The lawsuit is still ongoing. Billionaire venture capitalist Mark Andreessen claimed, and this was also in 2023, that imposing the cost of actual or potential copyright liability on the creators of AI models will either kill or significantly hamper the AI industry, Meanwhile, artists are fighting for a way of life, one of them said. Do you think copyright law, as currently written, is equipped to handle what generative AI is doing to creative workers?
I do. I think they should be liable, frankly. There was a book about a decade ago, Hollywood's Copyright Wars, and it was about some of the early Supreme Court decisions involving copyright and film. Everyone wanted their thing protected, but they wanted to be able to use other people's stuff more freely. That's what's going on here. They want to be able to use the content without any compensation. How you figure out how much you pay for it is tough. It's a difficult question, but I don't think they get a pass just because they built something using someone else's intellectual property and it came out nice.
What we're talking about here in a broader sense is AI's disruption in a business environment, in a legal environment, and certainly in a social environment. I'm paraphrasing here, but historian Yuval Noah Harari has commented that humanity is clever enough to build powerful technologies, but not always wise enough to use them well. In a podcast appearance last year, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said there are these moments in the history of science where you have a group of scientists look at their creation and just say, what have we done? Maybe it's great, maybe it's bad, but what have we done? And then in an April 2026 post on his personal website, he wrote, AI will be the most powerful tool for expanding human capability and potential that anyone has ever seen, but then also added, it will not all go well. The fear and anxiety about AI is justified. We're in the process of witnessing the largest change to society in a long time and perhaps ever. And I actually agree with him on that. Meanwhile, Harari recently said one of the most powerful forces in history is human stupidity. I mean, he doesn't mince words. He said, we know that nuclear weapons could destroy the whole of human civilization. We know that AI can now escape our control, and yet we keep on producing it. If humans were only wise, we would never misuse our creations. If we were only stupid, we would never have invented them. But we are wise enough to create incredible things and stupid enough to misuse them. This is a basic tension in human history. So my question to you is, again, do you think our legal and democratic institutions are capable of keeping pace with AI? Are we collectively being proactive enough, or are we dangerously pushing forth when reason and history are screaming that we need to use every means possible to rein in AI's forward acceleration? Because I'll be honest, I'm concerned.
You have a right to be. Congress has paid staff. They have incredible resources of people. And I have nothing but great respect for members of the committees, the staff members. These are smart people, but they're not always going to get it right because they may not always have the right information. That's at the federal level, but the state legislatures have even less resources, smaller staffs, and less sophistication. Dealing with technology is difficult for these bodies. That's why we haven't seen much internet regulation. Technology is never bad per se. Its acts, its practices, that is bad. That's hard, figuring out what it is that we want to regulate and ban, what conduct we want to work with. The internet touches so many people in so many different ways. Picture who's at the table. So many different interests would have to align and try to craft something. We haven't done it yet. Now, Europe, there's more of a consensus, so they've taken the lead on some of these issues.
Speaking of the online realm, on April 17th this year on X, Pope Leo wrote about the impact digital environments have on us. He said, and I'm quoting in part here, artificial intelligence systems increasingly shape and permeate our mentality and social environments. Like every great historical transformation, this too calls not only for technical competence, but also for a humanistic formation capable of making visible the logic behind economics, embedded biases, and forms of power that shape our perception of reality. Then he says, when simulation becomes the norm, it weakens the human capacity for discernment. As a result, our social bonds close in upon themselves, forming self-referential circuits that no longer expose us to reality. He ends with, what is at stake is not merely the risk of error, but a transformation in our very relationship with truth. I thought it was great because AI, just like the internet a few decades ago, became part of our everyday life. Now AI is permeating daily existence. And the fact that the Pope made note of this talks about how important this is as well.
Full disclosure, I'm named after a priest, my uncle, and I was an altar boy and all that stuff. I think it's a thoughtful assessment about taking a step back and understanding that we're entering a new age and that we really need to think about this somewhat differently and understand that the rules of the environment has changed and that we should assess about how we're going to deal with that as human beings, as thoughtful people, and how do we fulfill our purpose in that environment. I think a lot of people are a little intimidated or at that early age.
In a greater sense, we're talking about ethics, morality in daily existence, in the world and society. And I'm always interested in the intersection between law and ethics. If you picture a Venn diagram, there is an overlap between the two, but only someone with limited mental faculties believes that if something is legal, it's always ethical, or conversely, if it's illegal, it's always unethical. What should we think about that gap in the current environment where we're seeing ethical obligations that have no legal enforcement mechanism? What fills in when the law can't?
That goes to that question, can and should. We're consumers and we have a right to question and decide with our feet or our clicks which enterprises will work with. All of them could be perfectly legal, but this is one we trust from an ethical point of view that is not going to harm people unfairly. Ultimately, we can get to that point, I think, where we can choose purveyors of AI who do it in a way that we're comfortable with. Problem is it's so new, so it's kind of the wild, wild west.
Speaking of ethics and even more moral courage, your firm, the Internet Law Center, was one of 807 firms that signed an amicus brief challenging President Trump's executive order targeting big-name law firm Jenner & Block. Other firms essentially made deals with the administration. Can you briefly explain what was behind the executive order?
So basically, you had President Trump campaigning in 2024, quote, "I will be your retribution." I think the voters probably heard that meaning that he would be fighting for them, but no, it's actually his retribution. And so he went after law firms tied to his political opponents or people involved in prosecutions of him. Basically, the executive order would suspend their security clearance, terminate any engagement, limit access to federal buildings, which I thought was strange, require government contracts to disclose any relationships with such firms, and direct the EEOC to investigate their diversity practices. Basically, the sole purpose was to punish firms that Trump perceived as enemies. A number of firms said they didn't want to put at risk contracts and being singled out by Trump and having their clients singled out. They signed agreements with the administration. Those agreements, it turns out, that's just part of it. There's always something more. There's a devil's bargain that they made. I was so glad to see that some firms stood up. I had to stand with them. I was surprised not more did. My father, he fought World War II. He flew 27 missions over Germany in 1945. Very dangerous time. And, he put his life on the line to fight against this type of stuff, fascism. This is the least I can do. Just putting my name on a brief.
Thank you for sharing that. Where can people find you online to learn more about your work?
I'm at internetlawcenter.net. On Twitter, I'm at internetlawcent. I have a blog, ILC Cyber Report, which has won some LA Press Club awards, so now I'm up to 5.
Bennet, thank you so much for having taken the time today.
Thank you.